Welcome to Mr. Phantom Channel, a place where spiritual mysteries and ghostly stories are unveiled. This is not for the faint of heart, but a doorway into another realm, a world where the shadows murmur the truth. If you're a fan of spine-chilling tales and the supernatural, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our haunting explorations. Get ready. The darkness holds secrets waiting to be discovered. The Haunting of the Apple Tree in Alderwood. My story takes place in Alderwood, a tranquil village nestled in the English countryside, where rolling green hills and quaint stone cottages paint a picture-perfect landscape. Life in Alderwood moved at a gentle pace, undisturbed by the hustle of modernity. My family, my father, Thomas, my mother, Eleanor, and me, Amelia, lived in a small but cozy home not far from the village center. About a kilometer from our house, near the entrance to the village, stood Baker's General Store, the go-to spot for all the villagers. Beside the store loomed a massive apple tree with gnarled branches that seemed to reach toward the sky. No one in Alderwood could recall when it had first been planted. To the villagers, it was simply always there, standing as a silent sentinel. But for as long as I could remember, the apple tree had always unsettled me. There was something about it that felt wrong. It was a chilly Friday evening in late October, and the air was filled with the damp scent of soil and fallen leaves. Like every weekend, my family gathered in the living room, watching an old film on TV while nibbling on the cookies my mother had just baked. The familiar warmth and laughter made me feel safe and content. By 11 p.m., my parents headed upstairs to bed, but I couldn't sleep. Restless, I stepped out onto the small balcony of my room, breathing in the crisp night air. The village was still, cloaked in an almost eerie silence, with only the pale moonlight illuminating the landscape. My eyes wandered to Baker's General Store and, of course, to the apple tree standing tall beside it. But this time, it didn't look like the familiar sight I had grown used to. On the highest branch of the tree, I saw a figure. Someone was sitting there, their legs dangling lazily as if enjoying a quiet evening. But something was terribly wrong. The tree swayed violently, its branches creaking under the weight. Even though there wasn't a hint of wind, the figure turned to face me, and then I saw it, that smile. It wasn't a normal smile. It stretched far too wide, grotesque and unnatural. The moonlight glinted off their teeth, and their eyes gleamed with an unnatural light that pierced through the darkness. Locking onto me, I screamed, breaking the stillness of the night. Without thinking, I bolted inside, slamming the balcony door shut. My parents rushed into my room, alarmed. "What's wrong, Amelia?" My mother, Eleanor, asked, her face etched with concern. How could I explain what I had just seen? "It's nothing," I stammered. "Just a nightmare." They didn't press further, though my mother's worried expression lingered. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, haunted by the image of that twisted smile. In the days that followed, I began noticing unusual occurrences. Every time I passed by Baker's General Store, I felt an inexplicable chill crawl up my spine, as if unseen eyes were watching me. Though I avoided looking directly at the apple tree, it seemed to loom larger in my thoughts with each passing day. One afternoon, while walking home from school, I passed by the tree at dusk. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across its gnarled trunk. The branches stretched out like skeletal arms, and an unnatural stillness hung in the air, quickened my pace, refusing to look back. That night, As I lay in bed, I heard it, a soft, deliberate tapping on my window. At first, I thought it was just the wind or a loose branch, but when I peered through the curtains, I saw nothing, only the dark silhouette of the apple tree under the moonlight. Yet, the tapping persisted, rhythmic and unnerving. Desperate for answers, I began asking the older villagers about the tree. Most shrugged it off as nothing more than an ancient apple tree. But one afternoon, I spoke to Alfred Brown, an elder who had lived in Alderwood his entire life. When I mentioned the tree, his expression darkened. "That tree," he said gravely, "stands where the old cemetery used to be, decades ago, before Alderwood became what it is today. There was a graveyard there. When people started settling, they cleared the land to build houses and shops. But the tree grew from that soil, and not all spirits left with the graves." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Many have seen strange things around that tree. Shadows, figures. Some say it's cursed. Don't go near it." Amelia, that night, unable to resist the pull of curiosity, I decided to face my fear, armed with a small flashlight. I crept out of the house and made my way toward Baker's General Store. The air was colder than usual, and an unnatural silence blanketed the village. As I approached the tree, I noticed the ground beneath it was barren and cracked, as if nothing could grow there. My flashlight flickered as I shone its beam across the twisted branches. And then, I saw it. The figure was hanging from a thick branch, a rope around its neck. His body swayed gently, though the air was completely still. His face was pale and gaunt, but its glowing eyes locked onto mine, and that same twisted smile remained frozen in place. "Why are you here?" a raspy voice whispered, sounding like dry leaves scraping against stone. My legs felt like lead as I stumbled backward, tripping over a root. The flashlight fell from my hands, its beam slicing through the darkness. When I finally picked it up and looked back at the tree, the figure was gone. Terrified, I turned to Father Michael Turner, the priest at St. Mary's Church in Alderwood. I recounted everything: the figure, the tapping, the whispers, and the villagers' stories. He listened intently, his expression serious but compassionate. "We must hold a service," he said firmly. "If a spirit lingers, we will pray for its peace." That Sunday, Father Michael led a small group, including my parents and a few other villagers, to the apple tree. He sprinkled holy water over the ground and recited prayers, his voice steady and resolute. The air grew heavy, oppressive, as if the tree itself resisted the blessing. When the ritual was over, I felt a momentary sense of relief. Perhaps it was finally over, but it wasn't. The strange occurrences persisted. The whispers grew louder at night, and shadows moved where no shadows should be. One night, I woke to find my bedroom door ajar, though I always closed it before bed. On the floor, leading from the door to my bed, were wet footprints. Panicked, rushing to wake my parents, my father searched the house thoroughly but found nothing. "It's just your imagination," he said, though I saw the unease in his eyes. To this day, I can't explain what haunted the apple tree, despite the prayers, the blessings, and my attempts to move on. Its presence lingers, a shadow over Alderwood and a constant reminder of a past that refuses to rest. Even now, years later, I avoid looking at the tree, not because I fear seeing something, but because I know it's still watching me. The haunting summer, the forgotten room. It was a sweltering summer evening during my first college break. I had been bedridden for 3 weeks, weakened and drained from a persistent illness. Our quiet house, nestled at the end of a small rural lane surrounded by fields and trees, had always been a place of tranquility. But this summer, the peace felt suffocating, as if something unseen was weighing heavily on the air. That evening, my mother went to sing in the church choir. Before leaving, she reminded me, "Don't forget to lock the door before you sleep, dear." I gave a weak nod, too tired to argue. In truth, I didn't have the energy to get up. After an exhausting day of lying in bed, I quickly drifted into a deep sleep. I didn't know how long I had been asleep, but a sensation jolted me awake. The room was pitch dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of a nightlight in the corner. A chill ran down my spine as I realized someone was lying beside me. My narrow bed felt cramped, and my shoulder brushed against something soft but unnervingly cold. In my groggy state, I thought it might be my father or uncle, perhaps home early and resting on my bed. Despite my fatigue, I forced myself to turn and look. A figure dressed in white, emitting a faint glow, lay next to me. I couldn't see their face clearly, only a blurry outline of a human form. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness and nausea overwhelmed me. Unable to comprehend what I was seeing, I turned my back to the figure, pressing against the wall, and tried to sleep. But just a few minutes later, an intense pressure pinned me down. My arms were locked to the bed, and an icy grip tightened around my neck, choking me. Couldn't breathe, couldn't move. It felt as though someone, or something, was sitting on my chest, crushing the life out of me. Then, just as abruptly, the weight vanished. I heard soft footsteps retreating from the bed, followed by a gentle knock at the door. Shaking, I staggered out of bed and made my way to the door. When I opened it, my father stood there, holding a small bag of groceries. He looked at me with confusion. "Why did you lock the door? I couldn't open it," he asked. I froze. Lock the door? I was certain I hadn't locked it. My exhaustion and lingering fear left me speechless. Before I could respond, my mother and uncle arrived home, their chatter filling the house and momentarily dispelling my unease. As we settled into the evening routine, my mother suddenly asked, "Where's Angel?" Angel, our loyal little dog, always greeted us enthusiastically when we returned home. But that night, she didn't appear. We called her name, searching every corner of the house. Finally, I found her hiding under a cabinet in the living room. Her small body trembled violently, and her wide eyes were filled with fear. When I reached out, she whimpered softly, as if in pain. Maybe she just got startled, my mother suggested, though her voice was tinged with concern. As the family gathered in the living room, I hesitated before recounting what had happened. Their reactions were as expected. My father chuckled and dismissed it as a nightmare, while my mother, though worried, chalked it up to my exhaustion and illness. But Angel wasn't imagining things. She had seen something none of us could understand. From that night on, Angel's behavior grew increasingly strange. She often stared into empty corners, barking furiously at nothing. Sometimes, she whimpered and curled up as though hiding from an unseen threat. At night, she refused to enter my room. When I tried to carry her in, she thrashed and squirmed, desperate to escape. I wasn't immune to the house's shift either. My dreams were haunted by eerie figures dressed in white, their eyeless faces hovering over me as they whispered incomprehensible words. Each time I woke, my body felt heavy, as if I had been restrained all night. A few months later, Angel suddenly fell ill. She stopped eating, her small body growing weaker by the day. Despite our efforts, including visits to the vet. Her condition only worsened. One morning, as we carried Angel to the vet, we passed by my bedroom, the same room where I had experienced that horrifying night. Angel, seemingly lifeless, suddenly perked up and barked loudly. It was a frantic, desperate sound, as though she was trying to warn us of something. But those were Angel's last barks. Minutes later, as we stepped through the front door of the vet's office, Angel took her final breath in my arms. The pain of losing her was indescribable. But what haunted me even more was the certainty that her death was connected to whatever had taken root in that room. The strange occurrences only escalated. My bedroom door, though closed and locked, would swing open on its own. One night, while we were all downstairs, a loud crash echoed from upstairs. We rushed to investigate and found my lamp shattered on the floor. None of us had been upstairs. "We can't go on like this," my mother said, her voice trembling. "We need to seal that room." My father agreed. The next day, we cleared out everything in the room. As we moved my belongings, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Each time I turned my back, I felt as though someone, or something, was standing just behind me. When the room was empty, my father secured the door with a heavy padlock and wrapped a chain around the handle. "Just to be safe," he said, though his pale face betrayed his unease. From that day on, the room was abandoned. No one dared to enter, and we rarely spoke of it. But every time I passed by, I felt a chill creeping down my spine. With the room sealed, the strange occurrences ceased, at least for the most part. The house felt lighter, as though the oppressive presence had been contained. But the memories lingered. My mother avoided the door, muttering prayers each time she passed it. My father became more withdrawn, spending long hours away from the house, as though trying to escape its grip. As for me, I tried to move on, but at night, I sometimes heard faint whispers coming from behind the sealed door. I told myself it was just my imagination. Deep down, though, I knew the truth. Whatever haunted that room hadn't truly left. It was waiting. Months later, I found myself alone in the house once more. It was a cold, rainy evening, the wind howling outside. As I sat reading in the kitchen, a knock at the front door startled me. I opened the door to find no one there. The street outside was deserted, rain pouring relentlessly, but when I turned back, I saw it, the door to my old bedroom, slightly ajar. The padlock lay on the floor, broken. I froze. A shadow flickered inside the room, moving swiftly across the wall. Then, the door creaked open wider, revealing the dark void within. I ran. That was the last night I stayed in that house. My parents soon decided to sell it, unable to bear the weight of its haunting presence. The new owners converted the room into storage, but I never heard from them again. Even now, years later, I can't forget the oppressive weight, the choking grip, or Angel's desperate final barks. Whatever haunted that room remains etched in my memory, a chilling reminder of the summer I'll never forget. Sometimes, I wonder if sealing the room truly ended it, or if it merely trapped something inside, waiting for the next unwitting soul to set it free. The haunting beneath the pond. I grew up in a small village on the outskirts of Zhejiang province, China. The village, named Qinglin, carried a poetic charm, but for me, it always held an inexplicable sense of unease. My grandparents' house sat near a deep pond, surrounded by towering bamboo groves that swayed gently in the wind. That pond was a central feature of my childhood, serene on the surface, yet harboring an air of mystery beneath. Whenever I visited, My grandparents would recount eerie tales about the pond. Some claimed to have seen a woman's shadow lingering near the water on moonlit nights, her eyes fixed on the bamboo grove. Others believed the pond was cursed, home to restless spirits who had found no peace in the afterlife. In November 2011, I returned to Qinglin to visit my grandparents during a school break. The late autumn air was cool, and the bamboo swayed gently, filling the surroundings with a dry, rustling sound. That morning, my father decided to take me to the village market. The market was a small but bustling hub by a narrow river, drawing villagers from neighboring hamlets. The market was lively, filled with vibrant stalls selling everything from fresh produce to handcrafted trinkets. After finishing our shopping, my father received an urgent call and had to leave immediately, handing me the bags of groceries. He instructed me to head back to my grandparents' house on my own. The walk wasn't long, but as dusk settled, the familiar path took on an unsettling stillness. As I passed by the pond, the stillness around me became almost oppressive. The water was calm, reflecting the faint crescent moon above. Suddenly, I heard it, a loud splash. Startled, I stopped and turned toward the sound. The water's surface rippled. Disturbed by something unseen, I strained my eyes, but the shadows of the overhanging bamboo concealed everything. I reassured myself it was likely a large fish or a fallen branch. Still, an uneasy feeling crept into my chest, quickening my pace. I hoped to reach the safety of home as soon as possible. Just as I reached the final bend leading to my grandparents' house, I froze in my tracks. There, in the middle of the pond, was a figure, a woman. She wasn't sitting in a boat or on a raft. She was sitting directly on the water, her body impossibly balanced, as though the pond's surface had solidified beneath her. Her skin was unnaturally pale, almost glowing in the dim light. Long black hair cascaded down her back, floating as if caught in an invisible breeze. A faint, ethereal glow emanated from her form, casting a ghostly reflection on the water's surface. But it was her eyes that rooted me in place, white and lifeless. Yet they seemed to pierce directly through me. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. My breath caught in my throat as an overwhelming chill gripped me. Then, she tilted her head slightly, parting her lips as if to speak. No words came, only a faint, haunting hum that sent shivers down my spine. Slowly, she raised a hand and pointed directly at me. Panic surged through me. I dropped the bags and ran as fast as I could, the sound of my pounding footsteps echoing in the silence. I didn't dare look back. The path seemed to stretch endlessly, the bamboo on either side closing in. But I kept running until the warm light of my grandparents' house came into view. Bursting through the door, I slammed it shut behind me. My grandmother, who had been sitting by the hearth, rushed over. "What happened?" she asked, alarmed. I couldn't speak, my body trembling and drenched in sweat. After some time, I managed to stammer out what I had seen. Her face turned pale. "It must be her," she murmured, her voice barely audible. That night, my grandparents shared the legend of the pond. Decades ago, a young woman lived in the village. She was kind and beautiful but tragically unlucky. Her husband was a cruel man who often abused her. One fateful winter night, in a fit of rage, he tied her hair to an old oil lamp and dragged her to the pond, where he drowned her. The man claimed she had run away, but the villagers suspected the truth. Over the years, sightings of a mysterious woman began to emerge. Some heard faint laughter near the pond, while others saw a glowing figure floating on the water's surface late at night. Years passed, and I avoided the pond whenever I returned to Qinglin. The memory of that night remained vivid, and the once familiar bamboo grove now seemed menacing. In 2018, the villagers decided to drain the pond to convert the land for farming. As the water receded, a strange object was uncovered, an old oil lamp wrapped in tattered black cloth. It was found precisely where I had seen the woman years earlier. The discovery sent chills through me. My grandparents, now frail with age, confirmed that the lamp resembled those used decades ago. The villagers performed a burial and held a ritual to appease the woman's restless spirit. Although the pond was gone, I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman's spirit remained. Every time I visited Qinglin, I felt her presence in the whispers of the wind, the rustling of bamboo leaves, and the eerie stillness that settled over the grove. I often wonder if her soul has truly found peace or if she lingers, waiting in the shadows for someone to stumble upon her tragic story. To this day, I can't forget her pale, glowing figure, her lifeless eyes, and the faint, haunting hum that still echoes in my mind. The Doppelganger. My name is Adifir, and I currently live and work in Bandung, Indonesia. However, every time I recall the strange events of my past, a shiver runs down my spine. It all began when I was young. Stories surrounding the mysterious appearances of myself in places I could never have been. I don't remember much about those times, but the first story my uncle told me has always been the starting point for my unease. When I was about 6 years old, my family lived in a small neighborhood on the outskirts of Bandung. It was a quiet area, with houses packed closely together and a narrow road leading to the local market. One evening, my uncle Rahman went out to buy cigarettes. At the time, everyone else was at home in the living room. I was asleep on the sofa, and my mother was watching her favorite TV drama. Uncle Rahman later recounted that as he was returning home, he saw me, a child wearing a white shirt and shorts, running frantically across the street. He shouted, "Adifir, stop!" But before he could do anything, a car came speeding down the road and struck me. In panic, he screamed and ran back to the house to inform my parents of the terrible accident. But when he burst into the house, he froze in place. There I was, still lying peacefully on the sofa, fast asleep. His hands shook as he stammered through what he had just witnessed. First, my mother thought he was imagining things or had mistaken someone else for me, but the look of sheer terror in his eyes silenced any arguments. No one dared to talk further about it. But that was only the beginning. Years later, when I was about 14, another incident occurred that left my family even more unsettled about the strange phenomenon surrounding me. One evening, my sister Dewey came home from church. She went to the kitchen to get a drink of water and saw me walking down the hallway toward my bedroom. "Adifir, have you eaten yet?" she asked casually. I nodded silently without saying a word, thinking nothing of it. She finished her drink and went upstairs to my room to talk to me. But when she opened the door, the room was empty. It was completely silent, with no sign of anyone having been there. Just then, her phone vibrated. It was a message from me. "Dewey, I won't be home this week. I'll probably come back next weekend." She stood frozen, staring at the text. If I wasn't at home, then who had she seen and spoken to in the kitchen moments earlier? Dewey didn't tell my parents right away, but I noticed the way she looked at me in the days that followed. Her gaze was filled with unease, as though she was trying to piece together something incomprehensible. She only shared the story with me years later, after gathering enough courage. As time went on, the strange occurrences continued. One night during my university years, I was sitting outside in the front yard with two friends, Risal and Yusuf. It was a cool, quiet evening, and we were laughing and chatting under the faint glow of a street lamp. Everything felt normal until both of them turned to me with puzzled expressions. "Adifir, how did you get back so fast?" Risal asked, his voice tinged with confusion. Yusuf nodded, looking equally bewildered. "Yeah, we just saw you walking toward the store. You were heading down the road right in front of us." I froze. "What are you talking about? I've been sitting here with you the whole time." They exchanged uneasy glances, their confusion growing. "We're not imagining it," Risal insisted. "You were walking toward the store, wearing exactly what you're wearing now. How could you be sitting here already?" My heart raced as I tried to process their words. I had no explanation for what they had seen. The rest of the night was overshadowed by an unspoken tension, and we all parted ways earlier than usual. Even now, as an adult, I have no explanation for the strange events that surrounded me. I've tried to rationalize them. Was there someone out there who looked exactly like me? Or were they all coincidences, products of overactive imaginations? The more I think about it, the less convincing those theories become. What haunts me most is the consistency in the accounts. Uncle Rahman, Dewey, Risal, and Yusuf all described seeing me in places where I couldn't have been. What's more unsettling is how ordinary my doppelganger seemed. So much so that no one doubted it was me until the truth unraveled. I'm not sure if this is connected to the supernatural, but every time I recall those memories, I feel as though a part of me exists somewhere else, living a life parallel to my own. Life has gone on, but these stories remain a part of my past that I cannot erase. On quiet nights, I sometimes wonder if that figure still wanders somewhere, appearing to others just as it did to my family and friends. And if it ever shows itself again, will I have the courage to face it? Thank you for spending your time with us tonight, exploring these mysterious and spine-chilling stories. If these tales have sparked your curiosity or left you with unforgettable feelings, don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've had similar paranormal experiences that you'd like to share, feel free to send your story to the email address provided in the description. Who knows? Your story might become part of our journey into the spiritual world in a future episode. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our haunting tales. See you in the next episode, and remember, always keep a light by your side.